You're listening to the Third Down Squad podcast, the best international news podcast for the National Football League. We're your hosts, Derek, Josh, and Toby. Let's get you ready for a new set of downs on Sunday.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Third Down Squad podcast. We are less than 1 week away from the free agency period starting up. As you'll see, Josh is not here with us. He had some school-related stuff to get done, but the show must go on, and we have a lot to cover in this podcast. And real quick, before we start this, I just want anyone to know if my voice sounds weird or if I cough a lot, I'm dealing with a sore throat, so I apologize to your ears in person. Anyway, so that's me on the left. That's Toby on the right. We're both rocking the Colts gear, so I appreciate that. And now let's get started first with the NFL Combine. Now, the NFL Combine was obviously last weekend. It was definitely a fun experience to watch. Toby and I personally watched Sweat run the fastest D lineman 40 time that we've seen. And there were obviously some huge storylines, but we're going to discuss the two biggest winners and losers of the draft. Toby, I want to start with you. Who were your two biggest winners and your two biggest losers?
Well, of course, the biggest winner's got to be Montez Sweat. He was a mid-first rounder before the draft, and then that big guy with over 230 pounds just goes out there, runs a 4.41, and I mean, he now is up in the top 10, even the top 5 conversation for a couple of teams. If you're listening to the NFL analysts and some scouts that have not been named yet have come out and said Montez Sweat might be a top 5 pick in the draft this year. And before the combine, nobody thought of Sweat even going in the top 10. So that's for me the biggest winner in the combine. And the second biggest winner, I don't know if I'd really call him that, but is Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle from Alabama. So that dude just killed it out there. If you look on the on-field drills that he did out there, he was looking fantastic. So he was always a top 5 pick, but he might be actually in the conversation for being the best player in that draft class with Nick Bosa up there for number 1 pick, which doesn't really matter with the Arizona Cardinals right now at all, because a lot of people think that Kyler Murray will go first, and I know Derek is one of them. And we're coming to my mock draft later in the episode, so stay tuned for that. And for the biggest losers, I gotta say one guy that hasn't actually been at the combine, and that is Josh Jacobs, the running back from Alabama, because these guys who were at the combine were just killing it out there, and he was not being there. They caught up to him. I don't know if he's the far best running back anymore in that draft class. A lot of people still think so, but you haven't really seen him work out with the other guys on the field, so I think that's a disadvantage for him in the draft, and his draft stock will be dropping up to the draft. And the second guy that kind of lost in the combine by as well not working out is Kyler Murray, because there are some pretty good performances out there by the quarterbacks there. Not only Dwayne Haskins, but also Drew Lock and all the other guys out there. They were throwing some pretty good balls on the on-field drills, and Kyler Murray not even running a 40, just going there to be measured. It had a bad look for him, and now that the reports are coming out that a couple of his interviews were not going that well, he's a loser for me in the combine as well. The only good thing that's going for him is that the Arizona head coach has a big man crush on him right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we're going to talk about Kyler Murray here next. I agree with you. Montez Sweat is probably the biggest winner, just because of because a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, he's going to be a top he's going to be a dark horse first round pick to anyone that gets him, and just showing the speed that he has is absolutely insane. And I was close with you on Quinnen Williams. I believe that everyone still had him in the top 5, but nobody really quite knew how fast he was. But I think DK Metcalf ended up beating him out a little bit just by showing the sheer athleticism and strength that he has. I mean, everyone kind of had him, obviously going first round somewhere, but he's just like Montez Sweat. We didn't really know what to expect from him until he got to the combine and showed out. And I agree with you on the loser for Murray. I believe that, Dwayne Haskins went out there, proved, oh yeah, I got a cannon of an arm. I'm accurate. I can do all the things Kyler Murray can except run the football. I mean, that you're not getting Dwayne Haskins for that.
Yeah.
But he showed he's got a good arm. He's got accuracy. That's what he wants. Drew Lock, he went there. He looked pretty good. And, the other quarterbacks, they looked pretty good too. It's just kind of a shame that Kyler Murray, for as much hype as he gets and for being the number one topic at the combine, was not even performing. And another loser that I want to name, but I don't really want to name him this, but I will name him just because of him being injured, was Lawrence. I think just because of him being injured in that, and obviously it's not his fault. I'm not saying he's a loser because he didn't perform. It's just the fact that we wanted to see him work, being as big as he was and wanting to see what he could do. And we saw him athletically run a 5.1 40 time at 340 pounds. That's impressive. It's just in that process pulled a hammy. So ultimately you'll have to look at the film tape to be able to see what he offers. And I think that people will see that he is still worth it. I think he was a potential top 15 pick before the combine, but since he didn't really get to perform in all the drills, I think he kind of drops a little bit in that.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there, and it's not only because we didn't see him in the drills, it's also because even if it's a pulled hamstring, it's minor injury, but it's an injury nonetheless. You don't know if it's coming to haunt you in the preseason progress and training camp and rookie camp that's coming pretty soon.
Not to mention, given his weight. That's, 340 pounds, there's a lot of ways that you can hurt yourself when you're that size, especially when you're running like that.
Yeah.
All right, so now we are going to go to the Kyler Murray topic, and Toby kind of already went on that, was that there were a couple people from a couple different sources that talked about how certain GMs did not like how Kyler Murray handled their interview questions, claimed that his leadership and his work ethic were not up to their speed, and GMs should be aware of this situation. What do you think? Is this really going to hurt Kyler Murray's draft stock, or is this going to kind of just blow away?
I don't think that it's going to hurt him because it's only a couple of teams, and if you're listening around to all the NFL news around here, for example, Pete Schrager from the NFL Network has come out and said he's spoken to a couple of teams, and there were a couple of teams in there that said he had a great interview and he was great on the whiteboard and analyzing video. So I don't think it's gonna hurt him in the aspect, because if you like Murray, it's not gonna be any different because of a 15-minute interview. You can't do much in a 15-minute interview. And I just think that he went in a couple of interviews to show teams that he really wanted to play with and show them what he really can do, and other teams that he knew he's never going to fall that far, or that don't have the team that he just doesn't want to play with them. I understand. I wouldn't personally want to play for the Jags right now either, because they don't have any receivers that you can throw the ball to, or an offensive line that can protect you in any way. So I believe it's more of a matter of that he just went into I'd probably say it was the Arizona one, because he knows that they like him down there, and he has a good shot of playing there with a good team. And with other teams, he just slacked a little bit and kind of pulled an Eli Manning on them. And I could actually understand him if he pulls an Eli Manning 2.0 if a team that he doesn't want to play with drafts him, just says, okay, try and trade me away and we're good, or I'm not going to play for your team.
Right. Yeah, I agree the same thing, because we kind of said the same thing about the Washington Redskins running back Darius. He kind of brought to light, sometimes these questions that these GMs bring up, or whoever they have interviewing these players, sometimes the questions are just not, things you prepare for. Sometimes they're not questions you really want to answer at that time. And I think at the end of the day, we're right. Arizona's targeting him for the most part. There's a couple other teams that need a quarterback, but right now Arizona's the favorite at the moment. And I agree with you. I think he just he maybe just gave a couple answers that maybe a couple GMs didn't like. I mean, you can't really control it. Not everyone's going to like you based off of everything you answer. You can answer the same question every time the exact same way, and maybe a GM won't like it when you say it that way or do something else. I don't think that that's going to be too much of an issue. Although I would say if Arizona doesn't pick him up, then it could hurt his draft stock. The later the round goes on, the longer it could hurt him.
Definitely. Yeah.
But if Arizona picks him up, then obviously there's no issue there.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna. Oh yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, and I think it's more of his personality that he goes into a room and isn't that kind of extrovert that other quarterbacks might be, like Baker Mayfield, and he doesn't search to be the center of the room. He's just kind of letting the feel of it come to him and not be the guy that is putting the energy in the room.
Yeah, he's a very mellow dude.
Yeah.
He really is. All right, and the last thing we'll talk about with the Combine is Nick Bosa. There was obviously a lot of hype going into the Combine to see his results. He said he wanted to be better than his brother. Well, in just about every single drill, he beat his brother's 40 time by a little bit. Obviously, the 40 time wasn't that amazing, but it wasn't terrible either. And he obviously did some very good on the field drills. What did you think of his Combine numbers?
They were good. I think he wanted to do a little bit more. He always said my minimum goal is to beat Joey. And well, he accomplished that, but you talked about his 40 time. Yeah, his first run wasn't clean at all. The second one, there might have been a couple of missteps as well, so I think he actually could run faster than his 40 time. So that is, for me, not the best he can do. And all the other drills, he looked, I mean, you can't really measure the on-field drills, and if you look at his speed and his quickness and his step, he is absolutely the best in this class right now for edge rushers, that's for sure. And then you're looking at the arm and the technique that he has when he was punching those bags around. That was just, if you're looking at that, usually he would be the number one pick overall. But with what's going on in Arizona right now, I don't know. But for me, I said it, Quinnen Williams might be in the conversation now. But Nick Bosa, for me, is still the clear number one pick in this draft. Or should be the clear number one.
I said the same thing with Joey Bosa as I'll say with Nick Bosa. If you're looking at his speed and you want to see speed from him, look somewhere else. You're not going to see it. That's the thing. The Bosa brothers don't dominate with speed. They dominate with power and technique, because ultimately that's how you beat tackles in the NFL. You can't just have speed, because if you don't have technique, then you don't make it work. He has great hand technique. He has great power, and he has actually a very good first step when he pushes off. And it's just like Joey Bosa. He also has great technique. That's why he's able to be close to leading in sacks. I mean, that's ultimately what this is going to be. It's just everyone's going to say Nick Bosa is going to be a bust because he's not athletically very good compared to a lot of other defensive ends in the NFL. And they said the same thing about Joey Bosa when he went in 2016. But ultimately, he ended up being one of the best. He's one of the best defensive ends in football now. And everyone kind of hates to say it now. And they'll say the same thing about Nick Bosa when he goes there.
Yeah.
All right. And now we're going to move on to the free agents. Obviously, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, free agency period starts this next Wednesday. And we already know of a couple of key players who were free agents, who are about to become free agents and or franchise tagged. DeMarcus Lawrence received a franchise tag from the Cowboys, and I believe Graham got an extension, and it was Frank Clark, the defensive end from Seattle, got a franchise tag, and Jadeveon Clowney got a defensive franchise tag as well. Some of the biggest edge rushers in football all got franchise tagged this year. And now we are left with a couple of big key free agents, including in the safety category. But Toby, what is your biggest free agent left on the block?
I mean, it's gotta be Le'Veon Bell. There is no other way to say it. The biggest free agents this year is gotta be Le'Veon Bell. He's a guy that can transform your team from a good or decent team to a playoff contender if you are in need of a running back, which a lot of teams in the league are right now. And this year's draft class isn't strong at running back. You maybe have Josh Jacobs and a couple of others that might not even go in the first round for this year's draft, and usually in the last couple of years with all the guys like Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, and all the guys that were going in top 5, top 10 spots in the draft. This year is looking pretty weak at running back, so I believe a lot of teams that have a needed running back are looking at Le'Veon Bell right now.
Yeah, I agree. Le'Veon Bell's definitely going to be a big one. I think the biggest ones for me right now are Landon Collins at the moment, given he is 25 years old and is a leading tackler in the safety category. Each of the last 4 seasons, Landon Collins is definitely the big one at the safety position right now. It really stinks that 3 biggest edge rushers in all of football right now were all franchise tagged. That really stinks because I know the Colts wanted to try and get DeMarcus Lawrence, but we know that Jerry Jones likes to dish out money where, he's about to pay Dak Prescott $30 million a year for a long-term deal there. We're going to see how that works out here in the next couple weeks. But the big one for me is Landon Collins, and I think, honestly, with Le'Veon Bell, I believe he'll probably end up going to the Chiefs, to be completely honest. He's been dropping a lot of hints with the Chiefs lately, and obviously the Chiefs need a running back. It's the only position they really need on offense at this point. So we'll see how that works out later on.
Yeah.
And before we get into the trades, one last free agent that we want to talk about is Nick Foles. Nick Foles has there's been numerous reports stating that the Jaguars expect to obtain Nick Foles as soon as the free agent period begins. The terms of the contract will not be disclosed right now, but Toby, if Nick Foles ends up going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, what does that do for Jacksonville in short term?
It doesn't do much, that's for sure. You can put a Tom Brady or even a Peyton Manning down there right now, and it wouldn't change anything because they have nobody down there that could catch a ball from anybody right now. So if they are signing Nick Foles, or it looks like they're signing Nick Foles, so I think we can scratch the if right now. They gotta focus on getting somebody that can catch a ball from Nick Foles, because there is just nobody. They have to rely on offense right now on Leonard Fournette, who has had injury problems and even a suspension for punching a fan last year. So if Leonard Fournette can play more than, I don't know how many games he played last year. I think it wasn't half a season that he actually started for the Jags. So if he can get over 10 yards, that's great. So yeah, they have filled a hole at quarterback right now, but they have a lot of other holes at wide receiver and tight end to fill to actually make sense to get a quarterback like Nick Foles.
Yeah, and not just receivers. They also need some help in the O-line as well.
Yeah.
Andrew Norwell was injured a part of last season, but even with Norwell healthy, their O-line was still incomplete and one of the most incomplete offensive lines out there. And you're right. I mean, Nick Foles does bring an impact. Nick Foles is obviously the better quarterback than Blake Bortles. But ultimately, it's a matter of, is Jacksonville's offensive scheme going to change? Because the Eagles' offensive scheme changed immediately when Nick Foles entered for Carson Wentz. They did a lot more of the simple routes that you always run on Madden. You run the curls, you run the quick slants, you run the quick out routes. The simple routes that a quarterback can get used to really quick, but when he gets going with that, man, he's on fire. And Nick Foles shows that he can be. But the thing he had in Philadelphia that he doesn't have in Jacksonville was a few decent receivers. Alshon Jeffrey is a above average receiver. Golden Tate is an above average receiver. But they don't have anyone in Jacksonville. Makes you wonder, what will they go for in the draft now that they know that they're getting their quarterback? Will they go offensive line to protect him and hope to get a receiver in free agency or later in the draft? Or will they draft a receiver right off the bat and then draft offensive line later?
Yeah.
It's going to be a big question mark, but
definitely. And you talked about the offensive line, and just today, as we're recording this, the Jaguars have actually cut their right tackle in Jeremy Parnell to make room for probably Nick Foles as well as Carlos Hyde. So another big offensive line piece that they gave away in Jacksonville right now. So I don't know how that makes sense, but
yep, I mean, there you go. It's just more uncertainty. I mean, their defense is good, but they're starting to look, even the 2015 Denver Broncos looked better at this point than what they did. Peyton Manning was a terrible quarterback that year, but he at least had a few decent receivers and had a decent offensive line that was able to help him stay up. But they're the complete opposite way around. They have the quarterback, but they don't have the offensive line or the receivers to help him out. We'll have to see how that goes later on. Yeah. But now we're going to get into the trades, and there's been a couple of trade situations going on recently. Before we get into the Antonio Brown situation, we are going to go with the trade that happened yesterday. Case Keenum of the Denver Broncos is now a Redskin. The Broncos traded away their 7th round pick and Case Keenum to get the Redskins' 6th round pick. Ultimately, it leaves you to question, now the Denver Broncos have Joe Flacco as their main guy, and the Redskins now have Case Keenum as their main guy. Which brings me to my question, Toby. With these quarterback situations, do both of these teams think they have their fix, or will they both still be trying to look for somebody young in the draft or in free agency?
I think both teams have to look for another quarterback right now. Even if the Redskins are planning to start Case Keenum right now, which I don't think they should really. They definitely need somebody else than Colt McCoy to back him up, especially with the injury history that the Redskins had and Case Keenum had. So I'd say go with either. I don't know if the Redskins do want to get somebody off the draft, because I don't think they have a quarterback in Case Keenum that young guys can learn behind. So I'd rather go with somebody in free agency. Not particularly Josh Rosen. I wouldn't like that because he'd have to learn behind Case Keenum as well. But maybe get a Teddy Bridgewater to back him up. That would be kind of my way to go for the Redskins. And for the Broncos, I don't see Joe Flacco starting there. So I'd say they go for somebody in. I don't see anybody in free agency right now that could actually start in Denver. So I'd probably go with somebody in the draft, getting a young guy, probably first round, some whoever is available at the position that the Broncos are at with the 10th pick.
Yep.
So I'm curious to see what the Broncos want to do, because at the 10th pick, there might but not be the guy available that they want to have. So
most likely Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins will be off the board by that time. It does make me question. I don't think either one of these teams really thinks this is their guy for the immediate future. I do think this Broncos pick that I have with Greedy Williams at cornerback, it's getting harder and harder to think that they're going to want to go corner now that they have a quarterback problem. I don't think, even with John Elway, I don't think he truly believes Joe Flacco is the guy of the future, given that Joe Flacco is in his mid-30s, and he's not shown any real promise. Why would he show promise with a team that doesn't have a marquee receiver and doesn't have a good offensive line? It makes me think they will try and trade for get a quarterback in the draft, and then you can go for receivers later on and offensive line as well. But it's just, both of these teams have questions at every position except running back.
yeah,
Really, because both teams have somewhat okay offensive lines, and then they obviously both don't have any good receivers right now at all. So it's like you're kind of going back into the Nick Foles situation. Obviously, Jacksonville's going to strike gold getting Nick Foles, but with both of these teams, neither one of them is going to have a good quarterback situation unless they draft somebody. Both of them do. But of course, they're not going to get, unless they trade up, they're not going to get the guy that they want. And at the end of the day, they still don't have a great offensive line, and they don't have good receivers to back them up. And neither one of these quarterbacks has really shown that they can compete in a system like what they're in right now. I mean, obviously Case Keenum did well with Minnesota, but they also did a very good job of putting him in situations. He also had a good running back, a decent offensive line, and two very solid receivers and a good tight end.
Yeah,
but
true.
They don't have any of that right now.
Yeah,
so
but, Derek, finish your thought.
Yeah, but I think that both of these teams are still going to search for a quarterback in the draft somewhere.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I love the value for the Redskins right now. They are just giving away a 6th-round pick for a starting quarterback in the National Football League that isn't too old yet, and still get a 7th-round pick with that as well. So you couldn't get that kind of production out of a 6th-round pick anyway. So I love the value for Washington in that trade.
Yeah, I agree as well. All right, and before we go to the Antonio Brown one, we're going to discuss a trade that is just happening just before we started recording this. Toby brought this one to my attention, that the Patriots are finalizing a deal with the Eagles to bring over Michael Bennett, and we don't know the terms of that trade yet.
Actually, we do. It came in 8 minutes ago, according to Adam Schefter. The Eagles are sending a 5th-round pick the Eagles are getting a 5th-round pick, and the Pats get Bennett and a 7th-round pick from the Eagles.
Nice. Okay, so we do know they're giving up Michael Bennett and a 7th-round pick to get their 5th-round pick. Toby, what do you think? Who wins this trade? The Eagles or the Patriots?
I think it's a win-win, because Michael Bennett said that he doesn't want to doesn't want to take a pay cut from the Eagles, and that he either want to be traded or cut from the team. So it's a good situation for the Eagles, because it doesn't disrupt the locker room too much, and they actually handle it pretty quickly, because I think he said that yesterday. So having a deal on the day after, that is pretty quick, and well done from the Eagles organization. And of course, for the Patriots that just released Trey Flowers, or they didn't give him the franchise tag, it's a pretty good replacement there for the Patriots, but I still could see them getting Trey Flowers back if he doesn't get the money that he wants in free agency.
Yeah, Trey Flowers is definitely asking for a lot of money, and I don't think anyone really wants to pay him that much. So, yeah, if Trey doesn't want to come down on his price, then I definitely could see the Patriots bringing him back along with Michael Bennett. That would be a decent inside defensive lineman right there. Yeah, I agree with you. This is a win-win for both teams. The Eagles didn't have to cut him. They actually got something in return for him. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win. The Patriots get a player that they know they can work with, and the Eagles get another pick, hopefully to replace him with something. And now we are going to move on to the topic of what has been the last 2 weeks in the trade market, and that is Antonio Brown. All we have heard the last 2 weeks is trade, trade, trade. And this week, just yesterday morning, we heard a report that said Bills say that the Steelers said that this trade market for Antonio Brown, it could all be over by Friday morning. Well, Friday morning came along, and we were all waiting for something to happen, and we heard Antonio Brown to the Buffalo Bills. But hold on one second. Antonio Brown had something to say about it. Even went on to say it was fake news, reporting to his agent that if he was traded to the Buffalo Bills, he would not report to the team. So, Antonio Brown remains in Pittsburgh, still yet to be traded, and Buffalo has backed out of the trade all completely. So, Toby, what does this do to Antonio Brown's trade value? Because it obviously can't be very good, right?
No, it can't be good. I mean, but he's a difficult character, so if you trade him to a team like the Buffalo Bills, which actually isn't too bad, if you're looking at the second half of the season last year when they actually started with Josh Allen, they did pretty well, and I think if they had a receiver up there like Antonio Brown, they could actually be a contender for the playoffs again like they did 2 years ago. So teams might say that it is a little arrogant of Antonio Brown, but I think a lot of front offices are expecting that from Antonio Brown and how he behaved all along with the situation with wanting to be traded and the whole feud with Ben Roethlisberger. So I don't think it impacts his trade value too much, because there are basically only 3 teams that want to trade for him anyways. So
right,
if you want to trade for him, I don't think that changes much for you. And if you're a team that wasn't in the race beforehand anyways, you just have a confirmation why you didn't want to get into this at all.
Right. And yeah, for me, it's like, is this going to prevent him from getting traded out? No. But does it affect him? Yes, it does. Because if some team was on the fence of wanting to trade for him, and they saw this, they're saying screw that, or I'm closing the door on that. Because listen, this just makes him look selfish, as a lot of people have already claimed, but it just confirms it. Look, I mean, I know that Buffalo's not the biggest trade market in the whole NFL. I get it. There are other teams that he could go to. But the problem is a lot of the good teams that he wants to go to will not trade somebody for him. They're not going to be able to do that. And to be completely honest, of the bad teams that are in the NFL right now, Buffalo might be the best bad team out there.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Josh Allen seemed to be getting better as the season went on. He started to feel more comfortable. And LaShawn McCoy is obviously in the backfield. He's still a decent running back. And given if Antonio Brown had went there and he wanted to show his worth, if he had gone to Buffalo, would have balled out with Josh Allen, put up the same numbers he did in Pittsburgh, he could have shown, hey, I'm as good as I've said I've been all along, and now you guys can just be quiet. And then you're right. They could have built an offense around him. They could have put together some better defensive players to help on the defensive side. And Buffalo could have, they could contend for the playoffs with Antonio Brown, I believe. But he ruined that situation by just saying, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
I mean, he has every right to do it. Don't get me wrong. He does. But just for the sake of his reputation and for trying to show a team that I care, that's not a good start. It's not a good start, and I don't know where this leads him. I don't.
And if you're looking at the three teams that are being talked about as having the most interest in Antonio Brown, you have the still Oakland Raiders, you have the Tennessee Titans, and you have the Washington Redskins. And if you look at the quarterbacks of all three teams, I think Josh Allen would be a better option than all three of them. So
Yeah,
if you're
I
not
can
taking
agree
the
with you
deal
on
with the Bills, sorry, what are you gonna do about these three teams? These three are the front runners for your job right now, and they have worse quarterbacks than the ones that wanted to give you a deal right now. So I don't know what's
I don't
going
know.
on there.
Maybe he wants to go to someplace warmer. Who knows? He might want to go to someplace.
That might be it. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, you could go to Oakland because they're going to be going to Vegas here soon. I mean, you could bake in there, but also don't be afraid to lose 10 games every year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trusting in Gruden, he wants to build the power team. If he has the chance, he wants to get Kyler Murray in the draft and sign Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. And
yeah, it's just a matter of, do they have the cap space for that, and if they can even get lucky.
Yeah,
but I don't see that happening. But
yeah, but
AB, dude, this is just not a great look for.
It's not a great look for AB right now. But actually, if there has been discussions in around the NFL right now, with, of course, AB might go to the Oakland Raiders, and of course they famously traded away Amari Cooper just last season to the Dallas Cowboys. So I actually have a question for you there, Derek.
Okay.
Because it basically is a 1v1 trade if Antonio Brown actually goes to the Oakland Raiders. Did Gruden do the right thing in cutting Amari Cooper with what we know now that he can get Antonio Brown, which he did not know, obviously, when he traded away Amari Cooper?
It's really not, because I mean, honestly, I don't know if John Gruden could even handle the personality of a guy like that. And not to mention, like, if you had Amari Cooper on your team still, then that would be a great trade option right there. You could convince the Steelers, I think, that, hey, Amari Cooper for Antonio, and maybe a later second or third round pick. That seems like a decent, given like what we know now about Amari Cooper, given what he was able to do for the Cowboys. I think that helped him out a lot. I always thought Amari Cooper was a better receiver than what he truly showed. But I mean, if Gruden hadn't got rid of Amari Cooper, then that would have been a much better trade piece than what I think they have for him right now. Because I don't know, but I mean, at the moment, they still obviously have 3 first-round picks. Do they honestly get rid of? But I mean, what was the Steelers asking for? They were asking for 2 first-rounders, or was it just 1 first-rounder?
I think they're asking for 1 first-rounder, but in my opinion, I don't think any team right now, we've seen how Antonio Brown is behaving, and with his age, is actually putting up a first-round pick for him.
Well, not to mention the teams that need a wide receiver, they have needs and other places that are more valuable in the first round than a wide receiver. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think Oakland is the front runner for it now because they have the first round picks to do it. Have the first round picks to do it. They could trade away 2 of their first round picks, say, we're done with it. We're going to just get you for 2 first rounders. They still have the chance to get Le'Veon Bell. They could use that first round pick to get a defensive guy, and they still have Derek Carr. I think that you obviously wouldn't get Kyler Murray unless you traded up, but at the end of the day, you know, you would still get at least 2 out of the 3. Yeah. So, you know, that'll be an interesting situation.
Yeah, and if you look at it, in my mind, there is no way that the Buffalo Bills have put up the 9th overall pick for Antonio Brown in the trade that almost did go through. No way. So
There was no way.
that will make it the 41st pick in the draft this year at the earliest for the Bills that they put up for Antonio Brown. And the Oakland Raiders would have the 36th pick. So the Oakland Raiders could actually convert their second round pick into Antonio Brown and still have the 27th pick of the trade with Amari Cooper. So as you said, Amari Cooper hasn't shown what he can do in Oakland, so I would put Antonio Brown and Amari Cooper on the same stage of wide receiver. But they actually, if you put it up directly, if they can get Antonio Brown, they basically made a 27th pick out of a 34th or 36th.
Basically.
So
it looks like we're both in agreement here. Oakland front runner for this guy right now. All right. Well, now we're off from the free agents and the trades. We're now going to shift into the category that we've been talking about for the last couple weeks, the AFC and NFC team needs. And this time we're going to the AFC and NFC East. That's right. We're going to start with the AFC East, the Pats, Dolphins, Jets, and the Bills. Toby, what are your biggest needs for the Pats right now?
For the Pats, are pass catchers, wide receiver, and tight end. Of course, Gronkowski, we're still not sure if he actually plays this season anymore or if he decides to retire at any time in the offseason, because he had a bunch of injuries the last couple of seasons, of course. So I'd say wide receiver at number one for sure, because your number one guy right now is Julian Edelman, which is not a bad option to have on your roster, don't get me wrong. But you need that quick young guy that can still get the deep balls that Julian Edelman might be that step too slow with his age anymore. So wide receiver one, tight end number two need for the Pats.
Yeah, I agree. Wide receiver is another big need for them. I also think that the defensive line is another thing. Obviously, they tried to work with Michael Bennett here. That's why they made the trade to try and boost up that interior defensive line. But I think they're also searching, kind of like the Colts are, searching for that true pass rusher. Because even though they were able to get to the golf a lot, they had to mix in a lot of different blitz packages. And obviously, the O-line of the Rams was not the greatest this year. I think they are searching for, once again, that true defensive pass rusher. All right, and now we're moving on to the Dolphins. There is a lot of needs for the Dolphins right now. I think you and I might agree that quarterback is one of the bigger ones right now.
I actually don't think so. I actually
Really?
believe in Tannehill. The problem is for me that Tannehill never had the chance to really show what he can do. Other than, I believe it was 3 years ago when the Dolphins last were in the playoffs, that we actually saw with Jarvis Landry and a decent offensive line and a good run game what Ryan Tannehill can actually do. So I still believe that Ryan Tannehill is a good starter in the league. The only thing is the Dolphins don't have an offensive line on the inside. They don't have guards. They need two guards. They need a center. And they need wide receivers on the field. They should have never let Jarvis Landry go. I don't know how that trade ever got done with the Browns.
Yeah.
But for me, inside offensive line and wide receivers, protect Tannehill and give him wide receivers, and Tannehill can be a good starter in the league.
I do think the Dolphins will shop for a quarterback in the draft. That's just what I think that's going to happen because everyone else seems to think as well, because I don't know if the Dolphins believe in Tannehill. But I also agree with you first that the O-line and the wide receivers are the biggest concern, because the Dolphins the last few years have had a tendency to trade away their best players for next to nothing. They traded away Jay Ajayi for a 4th round pick. I don't know. That was straight disrespectful. And why they decided to let Jarvis Landry go, what was it, a 3rd round pick, I believe? It was
something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, we're just talking about the Dolphins. 3 minutes ago, Ian Rappaport tweeted that the Dolphins have released wide receiver Danny Amendola.
Yay! So the myth comes to life, ladies and gentlemen. It is confirmed. The Illuminati has confirmed it. They are looking for a wide receiver now. Oh man, the alerts just keep getting better and better. Yeah, so I agree with you. They need a complete offensive rebuild right now. They need something on that offense to get them going because they were really close to being a playoff team last year, but they didn't have the offensive weapons to keep them going much. And the problem is a lot of their receivers right now are inconsistent. Their receivers have huge games, and then their receivers have they don't exist the next game. So, all right, now we're gonna shift to the Jets. Toby, what are the biggest needs for the Jets right now?
Give me anything you can give me other than quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Honestly, I think the biggest ones are the O-line and the wide receiver.
Yeah, O-line, wide receiver, and a running back.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think that their defense is very underrated at times. I think that their defense has the tendency to make a couple of decent stops, but you're right. The O-line, they need to protect Darnold better because if he's going to be their franchise guy, they need to protect him.
Yeah,
and they need to give him a wide receiver, and that's why, along with the Oakland Raiders, I think the Jets are the runner-up for Antonio Brown because given the Jets have a lot of cap space and they have some assets, I think that the Raiders would be or the Steelers would be interested in. The Jets need a wide receiver just as much as anybody. They truly do, and I think that you're right. The offense of the Jets just needs a complete overhaul.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the wide receiver thread continues with the Buffalo Bills. I think every single team in this entire division is saying, dang, we need a wide receiver so bad. So Bills, what do you think in Bills wise?
Yeah, of course, wide receiver and basically the entire offensive line. Maybe not the left tackle, but anything else, guard, center, right tackle.
I'm going to agree with you on that too. We can agree on this stuff because half of it is just saying, oh, each team needs a wide receiver. If the Bills just tried to trade for Antonio Brown for a wide receiver, that shows you how much they really need a wide receiver. So that's obviously their biggest need. And I agree with you. The offensive line and defensive line, I think both need a few things that need to be shifted. But other than that, that's their biggest needs right now.
Yeah.
All right, and now we're going to move to the NFC East. We're going to start off with the Eagles. What are the biggest needs for the Eagles?
First off, a cornerback. You saw it last season. They need some help in the backfield, in the defensive backfield, to stop the long passes. Because if you watched them in the playoffs, the easiest way to beat the Eagles in the playoffs was just throw long passes. Chances are pretty good that you either get a pass interference or the receiver is wide open because the cornerback couldn't keep up. So that's the number one need for the Eagles for me. And the number two need is a guard. They need somebody on the inside that can get a running lane open and that can protect Carson Wentz so he can actually finish the season without any injuries.
I agree with you again completely. Offensive line and the offensive line needs a revamping, obviously to keep Carson Wentz up. And again, the corner, because I think their corners are good, but the problem is they continue to just keep getting injured. And the depth of that team needs depth at corner and safety. So I definitely look for them to continue to shop for the defensive backfield first. And now the Redskins. I had the quarterback at number one need. I think that still remains true, even though Case Keenum is there. And then the Redskins also need a wide receiver just as much as anyone else does. I think those are the two biggest needs right now. Toby, think?
Yeah, it's the same for me. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on in Washington right now, and we talked about it with the trade before with Case Keenum. They still gotta look out for a quarterback because Case Keenum, for me, yeah, he might be a starter, but I think there are better options out there in free agency, especially to get a better starter as a quarterback. So that still remains the number one need for me as well. I had it before at number one. It still remains number one. And the number two need for me as well is wide receivers. They have a couple of guys that are decent, but they need the number one receiver again. That go-to guy that whoever starts for them has his safe blanket in the end zone that he can throw the ball to.
And that used to be Jordan Reed
It
before,
used to be, yeah.
the injuries just started catching up to him, and he's just not looked like the player since then. And for anyone that watches this video or listens to it on Spotify, you may notice the theme of Toby and I agreeing on just about everything we say in these. We don't collaborate with each other on this stuff. We just seem to know, like, apparently we just think the same way when it comes to these teams. We obviously both do our research and we both understand how these teams work. But yeah, anyone that thinks that we're just doing this because it's funny, no, it's just because we know
have
how
no
it
idea
works.
what's on the other guy's list. We have not talked about this before with the needs. So this is all our own thoughts. It's just a coincidence that we agree on basically everything today. It's if you have listened to the 2 weeks ago or the last two episodes, it hasn't been that way for all the teams.
Right. And I think this one might actually surprise you a little bit, honestly. The Cowboys, I think they need a cornerback, and then I think they need an additional receiver. Because with Cole Beasley saying he wants $20 million in his next extension, I do not believe Jerry Jones will find him that amount of money. And I think Beasley might try to find something else. I think that with Amari Cooper, obviously they found their solution there, but I think the other receivers, if you can find a way to stop Amari Cooper, the Cowboys have not had another consistent threat, and that has been their Achilles heel on the offense, besides obviously a few offensive line problems. But my biggest ones is cornerback and wide receiver. What do you think, Toby?
I mean, I have a list on here with the top 5 needs, and cornerback for me is number 3, and I have wide receiver listed at need number 5, but I'm just reading here on Twitter that the Cowboys have exercised the contract option on wide receiver Allen Hurns right now, so he's staying with the Cowboys. That's okay. He didn't perform too well last season. Of course, he was injured as well. So late in the season that was. But wide receiver, I actually wouldn't put it at number 5. I made the list a couple of weeks ago already. So wide receiver for me, I kept thinking about it. Yeah, they have Amari Cooper. They have Michael Gallup, which didn't perform that well early in the season, but he kind of came around when Amari Cooper got there because he wasn't the number guy for Dak Prescott anymore. He had Amari Cooper to keep the defenders off of it. So I wouldn't put wide receiver that high anymore. But yeah, my number one need is actually a safety, which is pretty good this year if you need a safety. Yeah. We've talked about this in free agency, that there are a bunch of really good safeties out there. And the number 2 need for me is a center. They need somebody in the middle of the offensive line that can control the guards, tackles, protect Dak Prescott, get the lanes open for Ezekiel Elliott, of course. So that for me are the 2 biggest needs.
And finally, last but not least, we have the Giants, and we may differ a little bit on this one. There are a couple needs, but obviously the biggest ones that everyone talks about, and I will agree with, is the quarterback and the offensive line. I am one of those people that do not believe Eli Manning is the answer. I believe that the Giants are not doing themselves or Eli Manning any favors by keeping him around for as long as he has right now. I think they need to move into a different direction, say thank you, Eli Manning, for everything you've done, but it's time for us to move a different direction. So I think it is QB first. And then I think it will end up being an offensive lineman because obviously their offensive line has been average to bad every year the last 3 years.
Yeah. I agree with you. QB is the number one need for the Giants right now. Eli Manning, yeah, he turned around a little bit at the end of the season last year, but I just can't trust Eli Manning as the starter anymore, even with a team that has Evan Engram at their tight end and Sterling Shepard and OBJ, of course, at wide receiver. I mean, every other quarterback would light up the league with a receiving core that has these three names on it, but Eli Manning just couldn't manage to do that last year. So for me, they have to look for another quarterback, even if it is just a quarterback that they might sit behind Eli Manning at the start of the season, and if it doesn't work out, he can start after, I don't know, week 5 or something like that. And the second biggest need, I had the offensive line as well, but they just traded away Olivier Vernon for Kevin Seidler with the Browns today. So they have filled one need on the offensive line today. But I still think they need another piece on the offensive line as well. So that's my need number 2 as well. And then, of course, you come to the defensive side. Of course, now that Vernon as linebacker is gone, you need somebody to fill that position as well.
Yeah, very true. Excuse me on that. All right, so now the time has come. What all of you have been waiting for, and what I have been waiting for personally for the last couple days here, given what Toby told me his mock draft looks like, it is time to get into Toby's mock draft 2.0. Toby, please take it away.
All right, so my mock draft 2.0. Yeah, a lot has changed over the last 3 weeks since I last have done my mock draft 1.0. Of course, the combine last week has had some stuff in it that changed my mind on a couple of players. We have talked about it before on this episode, of course, but actually number 1, and that might surprise you, Derek, that I changed my mind on it, is actually right now Kyler Murray's going to the Arizona Cardinals. And,
yes, I appreciate you. I appreciate you for doing that.
I mean, after what you're hearing from Cliff Kingsbury about that guy, you can't deny it. He is the definite front runner for the number 1 overall pick right now. Mm-hmm. At number 2, Nick Bosa, for me, the best player in the draft, going to the 49ers. At number 3, the next best player, going to the Jets, in Quinnen Williams. At number 4, we got Josh Allen going to the Oakland Raiders as a, well, not quite a replacement for Khalil Mack. At number 5, of course, with his incredible performance at the Combine, he's going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Montez Sweat from Mississippi State. Okay. At number 6, the New York Giants are going with a defensive tackle here in Christian Wilkins. I believe they might pursue a quarterback with a trade, and I think they could actually go after Josh Rosen in Arizona, because I think it would make a great fit personality-wise from Josh Rosen to learn from Eli Manning, as they have quite a similar personality. Okay. So I like to see that in New York. At number 7, of course, the Jags don't need a quarterback anymore, so they are strengthening up their offensive line with Jonah Williams, the best offensive lineman there is in this draft class. At number 8, the Detroit Lions are going with a wide receiver in DK Metcalf, the monster from the Combine. Let's see if they actually can use a receiver up there in Detroit. At number 9, the Bills, for me, are going with an offensive lineman in Javon Taylor from Florida. like we said, they have to strengthen up their offensive line to give Josh Allen a little bit more room to work with. And at number 10, the Denver Broncos are going with Dwayne Haskins. Get their quarterback for the future. Big guy up there, pocket passer. I wouldn't say he kind of reminds me of Peyton Manning, because that is a little bit too big, but he definitely has the potential to be a great quarterback in Denver as well. So, Derek, first 10 picks are over. What are your thoughts for now?
I agree with the first three. I completely agree with the first three. A couple of things are different from 3 to 10. I agree with you on Jonah Williams to Jacksonville. I completely agree with there. I do have Montez Sweat in my top 10 as well. Not necessarily to the Giants, but I do agree he's in there.
Sweat is to the Bucks.
Yeah, it is to the Bucks. Yep. And then I don't agree necessarily with the Denver pick just yet. I do think Dwayne Haskins is going to go earlier than that, but obviously those are subject to change a little bit later on. But with the first 10 picks, I really like what you did there.
All right, so we're continuing on, and Cincinnati, for us all, is going with a linebacker in Devin White from LSU. Of course, the linebackers look pretty strong in this class, so there is some depth there. So the Bengals might not go with a linebacker in the first round and go with another position of need and take a, not too much lesser quarterback in the second round. With the 12th overall pick, the Green Bay Packers select Rashawn Gary from Michigan, get somebody on the inside, but I believe he might actually play edge rusher in the NFL. He's listed as a defensive tackle, but he might be more of an edge rusher for Green Bay, which is more of the need right now. At 13, Andre Dillard gets somebody for the offensive line. Like I said before, I believe in Ryan Tannehill if they can give him more protection and some weapons, and that's one piece they might give him in Miami. Pick number 14 for the Atlanta Falcons is a defensive tackle from Mississippi State in Jeffrey Simmons. And at number 15, the Washington Redskins are getting a wide receiver in A.J. Brown from Ole Miss. I'm not sure. I don't want to select a quarterback here because I think it might be a little too high at 15 to go after Drew Lock or even Daniel Jones. So I'm going with a wide receiver here. They might look for a quarterback, like I said, somewhere else. I really like the idea of Teddy Bridgewater going to the Redskins because I think it would be a pretty good fit there. Right. And at number 16, we have the Carolina Panthers. Of course, they need some help in the defensive backfield. So I have them going for DeAndre Baker from Georgia. And at number 17, I have a reunion with his old quarterback, Marquise Brown from Oklahoma, going to the Browns. That connection with Baker Mayfield is coming back to the NFL from the NCAA. And at 18, finally, Ed Oliver. Yeah, he's looking good on field. He might be the second best interior defensive lineman. But there are some issues off the field that makes me put him at 18 only. But I don't think the Minnesota Vikings can pass him off even with the off-field issues, which Coach Mike Zimmer is usually not that fond of. But with that talent at 18, you just can't pass him up.
Right.
At 19, we have the Tennessee Titans. I have them going with a tight end, TJ Hawkinson from Iowa, going to the Tennessee Titans, giving them at least one receiver or big receiver other than Corey Davis down there in Tennessee. And at number 20, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going with a linebacker. Devin Bush from Michigan is going to Pittsburgh for me.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on a couple of them. Let me fix this here. Yeah, I agree with the Devin White pick. I think Cincinnati truly thinks they need somebody to command on the inside. I agree with you on Washington picking a wide receiver. Now, I don't agree with you on the player, but I agree on the receiver aspect. And you'll find out what that looks like on my pick later on. Ed Oliver, I had a little bit behind you, a few picks behind you, so not too far off there. You and I agree on the Devin Bush Pittsburgh pick. You and I are pretty confirmed on that one as well.
Yeah.
So I like what you did there. I think a couple of those names I actually might end up changing my draft into as well.
Good to hear that. And yeah, let's continue. It's not the last third, but let's just do the last remaining 12 picks. At number 21, the Seattle Seahawks actually going with an offensive lineman, getting some help for Russell Wilson in Cody Ford from Oklahoma. At 22, the Baltimore Ravens are getting a replacement. I don't necessarily want to call that for Eric Weddle at safety with Jonathan Abram from Mississippi State. At 23, the Texans are going with an edge rusher in Jay Polite from Florida. At 24, the Oakland Raiders are getting somebody to replace or back up Derek Carr in Drew Lock. At 25, the Eagles, like I said, they need a cornerback, and Byron Murphy is still on the board, so I have them going for the Washington guy. At number 26, the Indianapolis Colts, there he comes, Derek, are going with Clelin Ferrell from Clemson, edge rusher, getting some help on the defense.
Yep.
At number 27, it's the Oakland Raiders again. Of course, we don't know if they can actually keep that pick with they maybe trying to get Antonio Brown, so they might need to use the 27th pick. But for now, the Oakland Raiders, for me, are taking Noah Fant, tight end from Iowa. At number 28, the LA Chargers are going with the Ohio State guy, defensive tackle Draymond Jones. At 29, Kansas City are actually taking a running back in the first round of the draft in Josh Jacobs from Alabama. I think he should be a late first round guy in Kansas City, of course, after the whole Kareem Hunt story. They need a running back, and Josh Jacobs, if he's still available, I think Kansas City might go for him. The Green Bay Packers at number 30, for me, are going with a safety, Nasir Adderley from Delaware. At pick 31, the LA Rams edge rusher Brian Burns from Florida State. And the last pick, of course, going to the Patriots. I have them going with a wide receiver in Riley Ridley from Georgia.
All right. I can agree on the concept you're trying to get there. I can tell you this, I didn't agree with any of those picks on my mock draft right now, but I did see where you're trying to go with all those guys. I think a couple of those teams have some more pressing needs, I think, than what you gave them, but we'll have to see how my mock draft changes this upcoming week.
All
right. Well, that's everything. That is all we have for this week. We hope you guys enjoyed. We obviously covered a lot. We may or may not have missed a little bit, but we appreciate you guys cooperating, just us two today. But hopefully you guys enjoy. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow our Twitter page at T3DS_NFL.
Down there, bottom right corner.
Yep, be sure to do that. Be sure to follow the YouTube channel, like and subscribe to that. We upload every week. And as always, we hope you enjoyed. Peace.
See ya.